Welcome back to Energy Innovation Month with Energy Now Media. My name is Jeffrey Can, and thank you for taking the time today to join this really interesting panel discussion we have lined up on energy innovation and what it takes to be successful at it. I'm confident that you'll find the discussion enriching, enlightening, and if you're in the world of chasing opportunities, should find it very inspiring as well. The format of the panel today is quite simple. I have a series of devilishly hard questions I'm going to pose to the panelists that will help surface key insights related to successful energy innovation. And there'll be time at the end for questions from you in the audience. Please use the Q&A box, just fire them in, and as I see them popping up on the screen, I'll direct them to whoever you wish them to be directed to, or I will take a good guess and handle them to someone to respond to. Now, our panel today has been very carefully selected to represent a full range of perspectives on energy innovation, everything from executive leadership, startup entrepreneur, proven field buyer, and even a financier, all the way dialing in from the United States. Now, before we begin, I'll invite the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and describe a bit about their backgrounds and their interest in the topic. And in that light, you'll gain a bit of a suitable background and context from which you can take their remarks. So I'll start. My name is Jeffrey Can. I'm an author, teacher, podcaster, broadcaster, all about digital innovation in oil and gas. My first book, which I published in January of 2019, is called Bits, Bytes, and Barrels, The Digital Transformation of Oil and Gas. It's now being translated into Russian for the Russian market. And I'm really, if with luck, I'll get the Arabic version and the Chinese version, and that'll cover off the bulk of the oil production world. I'm currently working on the manuscript for my second book, which is going to be about how you accelerate digital innovation in oil and gas. And I'm counting on this panel discussion today to surface some insight that I can incorporate into the book. So thank you all in advance. First, I'll turn to Chris Kotrowski to introduce himself. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Jeffrey, and good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Kotrowski. I'm a professional engineer, and I'm a subject matter expert in petroleum engineering and field operations, both production engineering and exploitation. I've been in the industry for just over 25 years now, so it's been a lot of fun along the way. Time flies when you're having fun. So in my roles as a manager of engineering and field operations, I always look for ways to leverage our daily workflows with digital devices and with data analytics, and really to maximize the use of all this digital data that we typically have, but maybe not tap into all the time. I recently led the digital transformation of NAL Resources. We achieved substantial OPEX reduction by introducing the whole concept of operating by exception. We built tools in the data historian to help us achieve the OBE state. And ultimately we reduced our OPEX by as much as 10%. And we were just at the start of the industry of that digital transformation journey when the company was sold earlier this year. Before that, I was with Devon Energy, where we set up field-based decision support centers, or DSC as they call them. And again, we integrated the data historian into our operations. We implemented OBE, and again, we transformed the way we operated our assets to be operated with what the data was telling us, as opposed to the traditional visits and stuff like that. So very pleased to be part of this panel, and looking forward to a good discussion.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'll turn now to Vicky Knott, who is with Crux OCM. Vicky?
Yeah, hi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crux OCM. So my background is training as a control room operator, working in the field commissioning control systems at one of Canada's big pipeline companies, and then founded Crux OCM with the whole goal of automating how control room operators execute their procedures, checklists, and rules of thumb in control rooms. And so the reason why I'm here is I'm, I guess representing the innovation side and the startup side of the small parts of the ecosystem that are trying to help out.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Vicky and I have a bit of a shared background in that I'm also from East Coast Canada. Vicky's from an even smaller part of East Coast Canada. which we discovered recently. So welcome, Vicky, to the conversation today.
From Newfoundland, for all those on the
Newfoundland,
call.
Exactly, East Coast. Yeah, I'm from New Brunswick. Now, David Forsberg, who is with Ascent Energy Ventures. David?
Yeah, I'm based in Colorado. I've spent about 15 years, maybe a little more, in the investment industry. First, developing and creating execution algorithms for equity markets, so automating sales and trading, and then developing and creating investment algorithms. And we ran about 100 million long short in U.S. equities from '06 until 2013. And then I started working as the director of investments for a single family office related to a known oil and gas family. And then we came up with a thesis in about 2015 that the digital transformation was coming to other sectors, in particular industrial sectors and the energy industry, which includes the traditional energy and existing infrastructure, as well as the next gen industry. And so we're really focused on this macro trend of automation and the required digitization that results.
Thank you so much, David. And last, certainly not least, Patrick Elliott, who delivered the keynote this morning. Patrick?
Well, yeah, good morning. I hopefully if people were able to attend the keynote this morning, they would have got my introduction, but just in the event that you weren't, just a quick overview. I'm the COO and co-founder of Carbon Alpha, which is a private company that we just started recently, providing sequestration as a service to the emerging carbon capture and storage industry in Canada. Prior to co-founding Carbon Alpha, I was the executive vice president and co-founder of Jupiter Resources, which was another private-based energy company in Calgary, where we grew to be the 9th largest natural gas producer in Canada. Prior to that, I was co-founder of another company called Cambrium Energy and was the vice president of business development. Since 2018, I've been an associate at the Creative Destruction Lab in Rockies, which is an accelerator for technologies in the energy space, specifically in the stream that I am in. I've also been asked to be an investment advisor at UC Energy Transformation Fund at the University of Calgary. I've got a background in geology, and I am a professional member of APEGA, which is something I think that you were looking for in our last discussion there, Jeffrey.
It was indeed. I forgot to mention that. Bring that back up again. All right. Thank you very much, panelists. Let me set a bit of context for everyone. So energy, as we all know, it's at the very heart of the Alberta success story. From the very first oil wells in Leduc to the development of the oil sands mines, to the extraction of bitumen using SAGD, entrepreneurs in Western Canada have led the way in developing new energy innovations. And innovations in technology, techniques, financing, equipment, and now digital. Our industry has historically been a magnet for capital, talent, and entrepreneurship. And despite the sadness and the despair and the losses visited on us by this horrid pandemic, COVID-19 has also been a stark reminder that our industry, when it's pressed, it can move very fast when we need to. You just have to look at how quickly we reconfigured our businesses to cope. And our need to move quickly has never really been greater. Our industry today is facing some of its greatest challenges, from flat or no growth markets and indifferent federal government, pipeline constraints and market access, capital market hostility, demanding ESG pressures, and a disillusioned supply of talent. So waiting for some magical solution to all this, it's folly. It's just folly. We're going to need to innovate our way out of this. But what are the ingredients for successful innovation in energy? That's really going to be the topic of the panel conversation today. And so let me, with that as a tee up, let me begin with the financial and capital access. I was quite taken, Patrick, in your keynote where you said, yeah, $2 billion check. It's like, wow, imagine raising that kind of funds. But I'm really interested here in, how are capital markets thinking about investable innovations? David, you're right at the front of this because that is the purpose of Ascent Energy Ventures. What are capital markets looking for?
Yeah, I think it's hard to speak for everybody in general, and this is such a niche capital space, which is part of why I'm here, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think at the end of the day, capital providers like predictability and high returns, and beyond that, it's kind of how you tell your story becomes really important, and the narrative you tell becomes, I think, really important. And most investors actually invest in narrative, especially at the startup space. So the story you tell and what you highlight and highlight in that story is vitally important. Startups, they aren't predictable, and let's be honest here, most of the returns are junk, because startups by definition suffer from overconfidence, and that overconfidence usually isn't shared by your capital providers. So I think that's important to understand when you're talking to outsiders who don't share that same overconfidence. But I think they're looking for, and as much as you can highlight what is predictable and what is your strategy and what are you able to do, will really go a long way here. And by defining that strategy and what you're doing as a company clearly and articulating it, I think that goes a long way. And every company is different, and what people look for are different, and different capital providers, private equity versus venture, are going to look for different things.
Different things, exactly right. And Vicky and Patrick, you're both at the front end of entrepreneurship with new ventures. I'll ask this next question to both of you. I'll start with you, Vicky. How important is a capital strategy when you get going? Because, as kind of think your way through this, if you don't actually have some thought around this, it can really trip you up. Where do you see capital strategy planning as part of your startup?
So pretty much coming out of a control room and then, attempting to start a company. Hadn't heard of the term startup or venture capital before. So it took a little while to kind of, I guess, get our feet under us as some technical engineers. Once I learned what a capital strategy was, it became very apparent that without backing or funding, we wouldn't be able to hire the team to execute. And that's especially important inside of an industry like oil and gas, because your customers are used to working with massive vendors, right? Like they're used to having you in procurement for 6 months. And if you don't have the team to move through that and the money to support you while you're getting to those contracts, you're dead before you even get started.
Exactly right. Patrick, in your Carbon Alpha, where is capital planning as part of your game plan? Is it front and center, or is it really about shaping the engineering as a first move?
I'd say we are definitely thinking about capitalization, and we'll be starting down that path here pretty quickly. But what we've really been doing is spending time just testing our offering into the market and talking to large emitters, and just ensuring that there is a marketplace for this, and validating our business plan before we really jump in with 2 feet. And I would say that validation process is going along as well as we had hoped. And so it is getting us positioned to go out for capital here in the coming months.
That's brilliant. David, let me come back to you around in your world of investable ideas. Are there specific promising areas of innovation that you think are really jazzing the markets right now? And here, thinking about carbon sequestration or a decarbonization more broadly, automation. Where is the market have any perspective around specific innovations that really warrant money?
Well, I think the market in general, is really excited by ESG and what I'll call next gen energy or related to it. And so tons of capital has flown into that space. I would argue that the volume of capital that has gone into it is excessive and turns good companies into bad investments. But that's certainly one space. I think the most interesting space, which is where I'm focused, is on that digital transformation, because I think all solutions to the problems that we have, and some of the greatest tools that we have as human beings to solve those problems, are the digital tools and the automation tools. So I think the application of those could unleash productivity gains that were really promised by the internet era and the PC era before that, that really failed to materialize. But I think that we are on the wave of a huge productivity gain through those application of digital and automation. So that's where I'm focused. But I think ESG and environmental concerns are certainly the most exciting space right now.
Yeah, top of mind. Yeah, exactly. Top of mind. Now, we've both Vicky, you and Patrick have touched on customers and how customers think about these things. Chris, you were the customer. You were the boots on the ground buyer of innovation into the oil and gas industry. What is it that you would be looking for from an innovator? If someone walks into your office and says, "Hey, I've got this great thing." What are you looking for that would motivate you to give them a trial?
Well, oil and gas companies, traditionally we've been very innovative, but sometimes the pace of that innovation is slow. Very risk averse, as you can imagine, because of the environment that we operate in, whether it's working with people, the public, the environment, et cetera. So we have to be very cautious. But when it comes to what are we looking for, obviously the innovation has to address some sort of a tangible problem or a result that we're trying to solve. And so, just because it's great and it does cool things, it doesn't necessarily mean it helps the business. So first and foremost, the innovation has to be, addressing, whether it's safety, whether it's improving the bottom line, whether it's helping us operate, with less emissions and stuff like that. So those would be the sort of things that a buyer that I would be looking for. When someone comes to my office and says, let me pitch you this idea, the first question I'd be going, well, that's great, but how does it help me, right? So I think it's important to for the innovators to understand what the oil companies are looking for, come up with a specific problem, understand the problem, and then come up with a solution and saying, here's what we have. And make sure that device, or process or innovation is safe, right? It's safe. It can operate in the environments that we operate in.
Yeah, safety is so important in this industry, and frequently, the entrepreneurs are not giving enough attention to this. Chris, another question related to this. What would it take for you to tip over into wanting to do a trial with a company or a startup? Obviously, it's got to hit a problem that's right on your radar right there. What else is up? Would you be looking to say, yes, I'm prepared to give this one a go?
Yeah, and oil companies are a complex machine. There's a lot of processes, a lot of people, and so it's I would say, yeah, it's important that that I'm just trying to formulate this. Yeah, I think well, there's two things. There's there's the how new is the innovation, right? So obviously, does it solve a problem? How new is it? Is it able to is it able to address the problem we're trying to solve? But then how do we integrate it into the existing complex machinery that we have? So some sort of a support on the innovator side, understanding that those companies may be small and not have those resources, but looking to work with those innovators to then put their devices together and make sure that they integrate seamlessly into the processes that we have. And so that becomes a challenge at times, because different companies have different people associated and different people dedicated to the innovation and improvements and stuff like that. So sometimes it's difficult to get going unless you've got the right people at the right table, and putting all these things together.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. Answering the question of how do you fit something in actually is really critical. Vicky, you're right in the front of this, trying to introduce a technology into control rooms, which are very, very prescriptive places. Are you finding that this question crops up? How are you going to integrate in with my existing world? Is that really one of the key things to get to trial?
Yeah, and based on my co-founder's experience in the past, we definitely were able to short circuit that one quite easily, because we've worked with SCADA systems and control systems a lot in the past. So yeah, that came up. The biggest one that comes up for us as well, or not the biggest one, but one that comes up is safety. And of course, we've got a really quick answer for that. We live outside of your SCADA system and outside of your PLC, therefore we cannot compromise those critical safety settings. So that definitely comes up. I think the having those strategies are really good, but like Chris said, there are so many people in these big organizations that you really have to corral, and you have to identify who's the influencers, who's the buyer, who's the end user. And what I find in oil and gas is that there are so many influencers, there are an army of influencers, and any one of them can shut it down. So that's quite a challenge when you're trying to find a willing partner to work with.
Yeah, it's a bit of a startup. I think, Patrick, in your keynote, you actually touched on the fact that in drilling, it touches every single discipline in the company. And frequently oil and gas businesses, at least in the upstream, may not have a single point of locus of control centered just on things like the drilling schedule. So is that, but at the same time, you were at Jupiter, you were frequently pulling small businesses into the company to succeed. What's your perspective around what made those companies successful when they came into Jupiter?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think of, there's an example that I have in mind. We worked with a great little company here out of Calgary called Virum, and they had a great digital twin type of technology. And I think that the way that we worked together was really constructive, and it was really effective. I had a very good relationship with the president, and he constantly kept me informed as to what was going on. He could talk to me about the analytics of who was using our product and how many of our employees were using it on any given day and how we're using it. And at the same time, they had a dedicated person working with our operations teams who was on constant standby to help innovate on the processes that we were creating. We were their first customer in oil and gas. They've subsequently gone on to get many other customers, but being the first one, as we introduced requests and introduced problems to them, they found solutions, and it just increased the usage of their tool set that they could then offer to other clients. And so they were very happy to work with us and very aggressive at getting us solutions as quickly as possible. And so that sense of being able to create positive solutions very rapidly and being well informed and well connected with those teams just made for a great relationship. And I think that's still one of the better ones that we had. And we had many great relationships.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense from all of you that the oil and gas industry is open for business when it comes to innovation. Is that fair comment, Vicky? How open do you see Alberta specifically on embracing innovation, or other markets more open and more interested than even in Alberta?
The American market is the most aggressive by far. It's the sales cycles are significantly shorter. It's the movement to implement, the movement to put together large contracts is significantly faster. The bulk of our work is in the US. We do have one awesome Canadian client, and they're the usual suspect, the folks who do push hard and like to innovate. So we're super excited to have them. But we have not had much luck in Canada, to be perfectly honest.
To the stage, yeah. Well, what makes the Americans so much more dynamic than in Canada? Any perspective that you've picked up that you can share?
I think it's a Canadian cultural thing. I think we're reserved and we're very careful, which is great when it comes to things like safety. When it comes to taking calculated risks within safety constraints, I think we get confused.
And we over-rotate to safety, do nothing, rather than
do something inside of a controlled, safe environment. We default to do nothing.
Yeah, bits and bytes. It's interesting about bits and bytes. They generally are non-toxic, and so we should be embracing digital change at a pace faster than we currently are. Would be my sense.
Yeah, Jeffrey, if I can throw in one thing, and it's sort of touching base on what Vicky said earlier, that typically these devices, they may operate outside of the, company firewall. And so therefore safety may not be an issue. And I agree with you from that perspective. The thing that people sometimes don't consider is the decisions and processes that those outside devices and processes make. And those also need to be considered in the whole safety aspect of things, because we want to make sure that the analytics done outside of the firewall, they usually get brought in and used in some sort of a decision making and or process later, right? So that has to be even though the device operates outside of the firewall and outside of the systems, the decisions the device or technology makes could very well be or is definitely part of the whole safety cycle. So
And the cybersecurity aspect of that too, if you're outside of the firewall.
Yeah, it's a big, cyber is a big concern, obviously, and even The Economist is now running articles around peak ransomware, thanks to the Colonial Pipeline disaster and the JBS food meat packing plant, and this is a constant threat. Let's turn to the methods about how digital innovators, or sorry, energy innovators more broadly, how energy innovators can be successful. And here, the innovators tend to be small firms and buyers tend to be large firms. So Patrick, I know you've worked on a bit of both, and at the same time, you've been on both sides, bringing small companies in as well as working inside a large company. What is the kind of dynamic that works best in that kind of construct, small firm engaging with large firm?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's really incumbent upon the smaller innovative firms to really understand the problem set of the large firms. So what are their problems? We would have companies that come to talk to us, and they would know the difference between a natural gas producer and an oil producer. And these are foundational things. You have to get to know your customer. And so investing time into understanding, what the nature of the customer's business is, and what the nature of the problems are likely to be are really critical. And I think the other thing to other opportunity to gain access to a large company is to try to work hard to find some sort of a contact, either an employee or somebody who is working in the field that you may have developed a solution for, or using your network to make a connection for. I just found that those have always been really effective at getting people that first meeting. And so I always encourage, folks as much as they can. It's not available to everyone, and I can appreciate that. But try to use your network as much as you can, and take whatever you get from that meeting and try to parlay that into another meeting with another energy company.
Yeah, I think that's really key is to be, again, know your customer. It's shocking the number of entrepreneurs from banking who show up at an oil and gas company's doors, say, well, this works in financial services, surely it will work for you. That just doesn't fly. But it doesn't answer the question, how do you go about learning about a customer when you're starting from ground zero? Any insights to share? I mean, Patrick, how would you encourage some of these small companies to get to know this industry, to learn, so that they can be more effective in what they offer?
Yeah, that's it's another good question. I think a lot of and Vicky's a great example of this. A lot of people are solving the problem that they wanted a solution for when they were working in the industry. So, Vicky was working in the industry. She had a concept of what that problem was, and she went out and built the solution, which is a great genesis story. And I think for folks that have some sort of insights into the industry, they should really leverage that into their business. For folks that don't have that insight, it's hard. They have to really spend some time either going through some of the associations in the industry to try to understand more about the industry and find out what the challenges are. But any kind of insights you can bring from your field of study or work into the solution set that you're offering, just like Vicky did, I think are really powerful narratives.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair. Chris, in your world, I think the tolerance at the field level for people showing up without a background or at least understanding the industry is probably pretty low. Wouldn't be a lot of patience for that. Would that be a fair comment?
I think that's a fair comment. As I said, we operate in in risky environments, so we need to make sure that people that come in and they're knowledgeable, they offer products that are safe, that do what we want to do. But one of the important thing is that for innovators, when they're looking for for companies who would be open to innovations, look at the top. Innovation starts at the top. And the CEO, the executive team, they have to be supportive of this, because no matter how good your contact is in the company, they may love the idea and they may be promoting it, but it's a tough battle when you have to promote it up, up from where you are. And the executive team may look at it and say, you know what, we're not quite there yet. We're not as open to innovations. We are very risk averse, and this just may not be something we want to get into. So look for key things in companies' websites, publications, what have you, right? To see if their executive team is progressive, and if it's open to innovation, and if it's open to adaptation. Because then once you find that synergy between the executive team and the workers who love your product, or employees who love your product, that's an easy sell then, right? Because then it's easier to start a pilot, easier to start a proof of concept, confirm that the device or software or system has a payout, the investment is going to be worthwhile. But it is finding that entire environment where you can flourish with your innovation.
Yeah, I think that's really such an important point. A real takeaway from this conversation for me is to look for those organizations that publicly say we are in the business of innovation, and we embrace that innovation. I know that in NAL's case, NAL was frequently on stage in Calgary pre-pandemic talking about their actions, Chris. And so Kevin, Keith Steves, the former CFO, Corey Berg, are frequently saying we are open for business on innovation. I think that probably encourages companies to come talk to you at the same time. So, and Patrick, maybe this is true also at Jupiter. Did you find if you were public with saying, hey, we are open for innovation, did that unlock companies coming to you with ideas you hadn't even thought about that were valuable?
I think we were really poor at telling our story publicly at Jupiter. We didn't market ourselves much at all. I think we, developed a reputation. We had a lot of our scientists and engineers presenting at conferences and demonstrating what they were doing and how they were doing it. We allowed our name. The other thing that I think is really important that small companies don't do a good enough job at is ensuring that when they engage with somebody like a Jupiter or like a CNRL, that they get permission to advertise the fact that they've got that relationship. Because as soon as you've got that relationship, and you can leverage that into other relationships, because all energy producers have FOMO. And so while they may be hiding behind the desk at some innovation, as soon as they see their competitors moving ahead with some sort of great innovation, they're going to want to get on board. So I think that that's really important, that companies ask and demand that they get permission to advertise that they have a working client relationship with organizations.
And David, I know that in your world where you're lining up money and you're looking for investable ideas, how important is it to you or into the shareholders and investors you represent that companies like a Vicky startup has a roster of proven customers that are cash paying and willing to take the trial? Where does that stand on your measure of criticality?
I mean, for me personally, I think it's vitally important. I think there are some investors that invest very early on, and that obviously is less relevant. But to me, it's a sign of that a market exists for the product, that there's market validation, that the executive team or founding team is able to sell into the industry, which just because you have the best widget doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get utilized. And I think the industry and most industries are famous for not using necessarily the best tool. And so I think that it's very important.
Yeah, I think it's a critical takeaway here is that roster list of customers, trials is key. But beyond that, the second challenge that startups face is getting to scale, and this is a challenge on both the tech company side as well as on the customer side. How do you get to scale? Chris, I know that in NAL's case, there were several innovations that eventually got to enterprise scale. How important was it when you met with new innovation? Were you already thinking at that stage, how do I get this to scale? Or did that come later after you could start to see the results?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you go in there thinking that it will do something positive for you. But before we can get to scaling it, you need to have a proof of concept, providing nobody else has done it before. Because if, as Patrick said, if somebody's tried it and they shared that win with the industry, it's a lot easier to adopt that, and a lot easier to see how that fits within your goals. But if you're trying something totally new, it's you have to go through the proof of concept, pilot it, make sure it addresses the all the key things that the company is looking for, and ultimately you need to make sure that the full scale development has a payout, right? I mean, it could improve things, but there needs to be that financial benefit and an improvement to the bottom line of some kind. And then a pilot will typically help that, and then once you prove that everything works, it's a lot easier to scale from there. Yeah.
And Vicky, and I know in your pitch meetings where you're presenting to clients, where is scaling up actually on their register of really important topics? Is it the first thing they ask about? Like, can you support me as a large enterprise, or are they really more interested in show me the money?
So again, it depends on the part of North America you're in. Down below the border, they say, show me the money and we'll figure out how to get you to scale. North of the border, they want to know everything. And so you're presenting, how you can scale, what your full plan is. You're presenting who your investors are. Like, I found it's quite a bit more in depth. And that's even if you can get the right meetings and the right people in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit tougher and challenging. Have you been into the European market, Vicky?
Yeah, we have been into the European market pre-COVID. Post-COVID, not as much, because we can't travel or do anything.
Yeah. But what was their attitude pre-COVID? Were they like Canadians? Show me the.
It was a little in between. It was a little in between. I'd say, yeah, in between Canada and the US, leaning more towards Canada.
Yeah, but more cautious and risk averse. Things are tougher in Europe because little things. It's a more congested place, more crowded, more sensitive to the environment. So yeah, a lot more people, exactly. So it's just the crowds that really drive things. Do customers really probe you around? Given your small scale, how on earth are you going to implement inside my organization, Vicky? Do they ask that question? Or where's your resource mix and what does that look like?
Yeah, totally. So we put together a full scope of work with the customers. All roles and responsibilities are defined, timelines are defined, as well as milestones. So we're very thorough with that aspect of it, and the whole goal is to make sure that everyone's aligned as we do these types of deployments. That expectations are set, and then also in the scope of work, we'll be highlighting the hypothesis that we're proving, which is, okay, after deploying this software on this asset, we are anticipating, X% uplift or whatever it is. Goal of this installation or this trial is to prove that. And then at the end, of course, we follow up with we develop the business case for clients to help empower those folks to go up dip and request to keep going.
Let's turn now to this question of talent, because in order to fuel this growth and this innovation agenda that we all have, skill set is really, really key. And Patrick, I'll sort of start with you, because in your role, you will have come off of Jupiter now into Carbon Alpha. Are there certain skill sets that you now recognize as being pivotal to, in hindsight, Jupiter's success, and now you're going to need in the case of Carbon Alpha?
Yeah, I believe that all companies are essentially data companies, and having engineers and geoscientists and people of the technical skill sets being able to manipulate, handle, analyze data is a critical skill component. I think when we look at the traditional schools and universities and coming out of those situations, we've got engineering, geoscientists, so forth, and other science talent. But more and more, I think we're seeing an integrated approach to education and an integrated approach to handling and managing data, because we derive all our decisions based on data, And we generate so much data now from devices that IoT devices all throughout the the value chain, that being able to master that data is critical. So I really see that as a critical skill set. I also think that just the mindset of innovation and thinking about things digitally is a really valuable component. So I think that that's a commonality that we would have learned and taken away from Jupiter and would continue to look for.
I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit, Patrick. You said digital mindset. What like how do you how do you know you're seeing it when you see it? Like what does it look like to you, a digital mindset?
Yeah, I think about when we think about digital mindset, it's really about being able to again approach a problem and try to bring data from disparate sources, perhaps even, and bring it together in a fulsome analysis. So, for instance, if I think about our drilling and completion operations that I touched on in the keynote speech, there was so much data that we started to collect at the end that we were not even using when we started, but we started to collect so much data, it was overwhelming, and we really had to try to find meaning in that data. So the digital mindset in my mind is being able to first acknowledge that there is a bunch of data, gather that data, and then work through that data to find true meaning in it, because without really meaning or context, data is really not all that valuable. So it's that concept, I think, that I think about when I think about digital mindset.
Yeah. Chris, if let me turn to you on this one, because on the talent side, if you're actually running an operations these days, the talent you're securing is coming out of our school system and maybe from prior employers, but certain skill sets are now cropping up as pretty key. What's your sense? Were there certain skill sets that were just in short supply and that you really be seeking, looking for as you were staffing up for operations?
Yeah, as we were looking at the talent that we required to set up the IOC internally at NAL, we looked for the skill set that we would need to run it and to support it. I think when it comes to engineering, there's a lot of great engineers, exploitation, production, operations that have a good handle on it, but it's finding the support for these engineers who typically don't have the data analytics skill set so they could continue doing their stuff, albeit more efficiently. And so data analyst job is one that I think is going to be very hot in this upcoming market. Anyone who can work in the data historian or with what be it Pi or other ones or Power BI, that kind of stuff. Take large sets of data, tumble it, work with engineers, or even just come up with algorithm themselves. That will be key, because the decision support centers or IOCs or integrated centers, they will need that brain power to be able to support them so they run efficiently. And that's going to be, I think, data engineering and data analytics is one where there's a huge future.
Sorry, yeah, hot skills out there. So if you're one of the 105 people listening in today, and you've got some young people at home, data, it's going to be big. Can encourage them to go into that career. Vicky, in your startup world, of course, the needs of a company that's prosecuting fresh opportunity. Maybe there's different talents and skills that you're looking for. What do you see that is in short supply that you would like to see more of?
Software engineers. That's the one that we need. So we're lucky enough that we've got an extensive venture capital network, and so we hire through the network. And I think that like oil and gas companies may not be able to hire the Google software engineers, like that's our head of engineering. Yeah. And so I think it's extra important for oil and gas companies to work with small companies like us, because that top talent wants to work at a startup, and that's how oil and gas companies can access some of that top talent. So I think that's another huge bonus to an innovative ecosystem.
Yeah, talent is so critical, David, in the financial world. You open up a website. I don't know about you, but the first page I go to is about the company and who is involved with it. Is that common practice too in financial circles? You want to know who's involved and what the team looks like. Is that a driver for capital allocation?
I mean, team and people is important. It's hard to judge on the ability to recruit for this industry in particular. You know, I was listening to a panel a while ago now, and a well-known person asked, you know, how are we going to recruit from MIT for this digital transformation? And that's the absolute wrong way of thinking. And it is part of the problem, I think, with the quote unquote recruitment to the energy tech space is this engineering mindset of we need MIT and Harvard grads to do this. And the simple fact of the matter is, one, that's factually inaccurate. And if you look at what some of the major tech companies have found, Google, et cetera, there's a great book called, I think, Work Rules from the former head of HR there. They found college degree to be one of the least relevant predictors of performance for employees, in particular in technology roles. So the other piece is, if you're looking to recruit from MIT, the probability of getting the highest and best technical talent when you have the Googles, the Silicon Valley, the finance industry, and other industries that one are more desirable and two pay a lot more, your probability of recruiting those people is fairly low. So from a recruitment and people perspective, I think we need to change how we view this fairly materially. And from an investment perspective, investor perspective, I am less worried about those types of metrics. In fact, there's a great study that came out on founder backgrounds, and again, it found the same thing, that MIT high-end degrees are not a predictor of success. So I think that we need to start looking at data and making decisions that way, and in terms of personnel.
Yeah, David, you'll laugh at this one. Our head of engineering is self-taught. He has a mathematics degree, but he's self-taught. He's been at Google and he's been in machine learning hedge funds as well as multiple startups. So yeah,
like
it's
best programmer I ever worked with, who worked with for years and still think highly of, was self-taught.
Yeah,
and we were surrounded by people with multiple PhDs, and he was the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's certain magic to that. Patrick, in your keynote, you actually touched on the idea of and you didn't use these terms, so I'm going to put some words out there, but it was the citizen data analyst. What you were encouraging people to do was to embrace this analytical role as part of their job, giving them tools like Spotfire and the like. Did that work? I mean, it sounds like it was pretty powerful as a concept, but did you find that everybody kind of bought into this, or was it more selective than that?
Yeah, no, you know, to David and Vicky's point, so like we took our average engineers, just scientists, finance people, you know, even in marketing folks, and all of them just had this curiosity. We made the tool sets available. We created the best practices for tool sets like Spotfire. We created a community led by our IT groups that would walk people through learning how to use Spotfire. And you know, I would say every discipline had one go-to expert user, if not more. And the type of work that they were doing was incredible. Like it was amazing. Everybody learned in the organization how to use these tool sets except for me. But that wasn't my job. My job was to try to create the context and ability for people to do that. But it was a beautiful thing. And people wanted to do that because it was an investment in their career. And so
it's fun.
And it's fun. Yeah, well, I guess it is. But yeah, I think to everyone's point earlier is that, you know, people can learn to do this, and they just need to be given the time, space, and some tool sets.
Yeah, I love the sound of that. Chris, you're out in the true front line of this. How encouraging do you find the oil and gas industry to get its talent to experiment and learn and trial these sorts of things while, you know, trying to run the day-to-day business? Is that really? It feels like that might be in conflict to me.
Well, you know, I guess every company is different. I can only speak to the ones that I've worked at, and you know, I have found these companies to be very encouraging, especially to you know, internal employees, like David and Patrick and Vicky were saying here. The growing internal talent is very important, especially right now when you're sort of in that transformation phase, when you're going from the traditional ways of doing things to the new phase. you need to let your engineers or, data analysts to explore, and, whether it's taking courses, whether it's getting out there in the industry and participating and learning what's new and growing that way. So I found that companies are very open to that, especially when you say that this is digital, this is going to make us better returns, is going to make us safer, etc. And engineers are great at learning new things as well. So there's always going to be someone on your team who will be the spreadsheet guru, and who will, like Vicky, who will think that this stuff is cool, and they do nothing better but go home on the weekends and they bring a new spreadsheet on Monday, going, look what I can do. I can tap into a whole bunch of databases and do data trends and so on and so forth. And those are the kinds of people you want to nurture and allow them to flourish. And so, I think companies are doing a pretty good job of that. And, the companies who aren't, I would certainly encourage them to invest in that, because that's the way to get your digital strategy off the ground.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, in your keynote, you also raised, you find the people who are digitally switched on, and you promote them, you amplify their success, you champion them, you talk about them, you put them on stage. This is what motivates people, is to get to show off what they can actually do. So it's such a powerful idea. I'm just going to out to the audience out there. We're at 100 participants. If you get any questions for the panel, just fire them into the Q&A box on the Zoom screen. I'm sure you all know how to do that, but in case it's a novel experience, you click on the little box called Q&A and just type in your question there. If you want to direct your question to a specific person, by all means, just tag Vicky or David or Patrick or Chris or myself in there, and I'll direct a question accordingly. But we still have quite a few minutes left, so lots of time for specific questions to be addressed. Let me turn now to this question of the ecosystem. Now, Patrick, I know you were involved with CDL. That's a part of the ecosystem. Vicky, you've been involved with incubators and startups. Patrick, how critical do you see the ecosystem as being an engine for innovation in the world of energy?
Well, there's a number of different ecosystems that exist out there, and sometimes that's actually confusing, and sometimes they're not always aligned. And so there's groups trying to pull those ecosystems together and try to get some cross-pollination amongst them. I think they're all really well-intentioned, and I think that they are important to the energy innovation ecosystem, and helping to foster connections, which I touched on earlier, which I think is really important. So those are important aspects of it. And I think the concept of mentoring is also very important. I think that if you've had some success and you've started a company and you understand some of the dynamics around customer relationships and so forth, being able to help those who are developing is extremely powerful. And it's a great way just to lift the entire ecosystem. And there are many people in Calgary who are working towards that end. And throughout all the different ecosystems that exist in locally, through my own lens of Creative Destruction Lab, I see a tremendous pool of talent, of mentors that are actively engaged on a weekly basis, almost helping these companies make decisions and positioning them for marketing, raising capital, and so forth. So the power that you can witness from that process is really significant.
Yes, it is a critical factor in success, in my view, certainly. Vicky, I know you've had involvement not just domestically but internationally in the incubation world. Can you share a bit about your experience there and what did that do for you to get involved with the incubation world?
Yeah. So for, as we talked about earlier, like some of the best people that can come up with really highly valuable solutions for this industry are folks who come from this industry. But what, a few engineers like myself and Roger don't have is pretty much any business acumen. I had none. Like, I didn't even know what a sales pipeline was. So going to an accelerator program like that was absolutely transformational for us. And I recommend it for anybody who's coming out of oil and gas, who knows of a huge problem that they want to solve. They might have a little bit of traction. They might think that they've got it all figured out. No, you don't. Go to the incubator, go to the CDLs, network and meet as many people as you can. I can't stress it enough. You're never too far along, especially if you're just starting.
And David, south of the border, how active do you see the world of incubation, university labs, investor groups? Is this as equally active south as it is in the north?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge, and they are of various quality. But like here in Colorado, there are a number of them. I looked at starting one 5 years ago in this space. So no, I think that the leveraging an ecosystem and being able to learn and be part of an ecosystem as a new founder is incredibly valuable. I participated in one that's slightly different, but it's kind of the Y Combinator for emerging managers in the venture capital space called Operator. And I think it's incredibly valuable and certainly can be.
Yeah, very, very useful. There's a question come in from Doug on the Q&A. Thank you, Doug. First question off the floor today. I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Doug's question, I touched on Colonial Pipeline earlier, and of course, JVS, but question for the panel here is, what are innovators doing to address cybersecurity worries? Specifically, yeah, sorry. I see all the heads are nodding. What are the innovators doing to deal with and be concerned about cyber, since the expansion of our world in a digital world is unlocking a cyber playground? Vicky, maybe I'll start with you. Where's the stand on your priority list?
Sure. So I did a whole bunch of reading on this. The actual breach into Colonial was through single sign-on. So because they had enforced single sign-on, it was actually easier for a hacker to figure out that one password, which gave them access to everything. So in terms of what innovators are doing from a tech space, I can talk specifically about our company. We sit inside the firewall at the, on a customer server, whether that be virtual or whatever. So we're inside. However, if a company doesn't have a strategy or really critical thinking around what their cybersecurity policies are and the culture around it, something as simple as a single sign-on can be your demise. And there's nothing an innovator can really do about that. So the biggest advice I have for companies in that situation is, please don't promote your IT guy who's been with you for 20 years into, senior security IT person. They don't know enough, right? You need someone external. You need someone who is very aware of this, someone who's maybe even practiced hacking systems. And really rely on that kind of a person to have a critical look at your infrastructure and your processes, not just a simple innovation. Again, there's no widget that can solve all the world's problems.
Yeah, to me, it beggars belief that a small two-person IT team in a company thinks it can withstand all possible cyber attacks from outside. It's one of those things.
And especially if they're a long-time employee, right? They're probably fantastic at their job, but this industry, the security industry and hacking, is evolving every month. And so how can somebody with 20 years experience at one company possibly be able to keep up with that? You're setting them up to fail.
Yeah, it's unfair, actually. And I'm trying to imagine being on the receiving end of a board call in the middle of the night going, hey, we've been hacked, and I need you to hustle in the office and go sort this mess out. That would be a stressful phone call.
I mean, maybe something slightly unpopular to say, but I would say that the hackers probably have done more for energy industry security than anybody else in the last 10 years, and bringing it to the forefront. And to Vicky's point, there's probably a material skills gap between quote unquote IT departments and what they should have, and the investment in those departments across the board. And it's a generalization, but I sat on the board of a financial institution. We had audits twice a year for our IT departments for security, and that should probably be happening for critical infrastructure companies as well. And I don't know that it is.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, you're out in the field. If someone walks into your world with an innovation, where is cybersecurity on your question list of, can you accommodate this? I mean, safety's one. Where is cyber? Or is cyber the same now as safety? Might be another way to think about it.
Oh, I would say they're both up there. And it's for me personally, it's evolved over the years. Typically engineers and operations folks, the single sign-on is something that I know we were advocating for a long time with the last company. With NAL, and for good reasons, it didn't get there, right? And they could just use the great example as to why that wasn't a good idea. But I know that IT teams, they fight this constantly. Them as a support group, trying to make things efficient for people in the field, for people in engineering, right? So it's trying to find that balance between making things really cumbersome for the users versus making it really safe for the company. I would say right now, especially having gone through that transformation, it's something that I haven't thought about in the past as a manager of engineering. It just wasn't in my head that it was important, right? Because IT would always sort of take care of it. But having gone through the digital transformation, I now understand why it's important. And so for me and the companies I work for, it is very highly up there.
Yeah. Patrick, I know now with your carbon role with Carbon Alpha, you're talking to investors, stakeholders, large energy companies. Do they raise the observations and the challenges that were visible from Colonial as a kind of a conversation with you in the startup world?
No, we haven't. To be honest, we haven't got to that stage where we're really talking to folks like that. So that really hasn't surfaced as an issue. But I will say that to a lot of the comments that were made earlier, we outsourced all of our cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is just too important to have any one individual internally. There are expert companies that are sitting there full time who are current in the marketplace for hacks and for groups that are trying to dismantle your systems. And I think it's a massive threat to North American energy complex. There's a lot of infrastructure that's sitting out there that's probably not well protected. We might see a fence around a perimeter, but that's nothing compared to the damage that a cyber attack can cause on industrial operations. I have the benefit of one of my wife's good friends teaches cybersecurity with at the Royal Military College in Canada, was formerly with Canadian Forces Cybersecurity. And the stories that he would tell me over the last number of years literally scared my pants off. It was terrifying experience hearing about what's going on internationally in the world of cybersecurity. And so I think it's a really critical thing that you just can't afford not to get right.
Yeah. And as an innovator, I think you do at some point you have to have an answer to that. This is how you deal with this and what your security position is going to be. There's no doubt that that's going to play a role. There's a whole segment of the market we haven't really talked about in terms of supporting innovation beyond the ecosystem of technology companies, but lawyers, bankers, professional accountants, financial advisors. I'm curious to see where and how you see this whole part of the support community out there helping you out. And Vicky, and I know in your capacity, you bound. I'm sure you have a financial help, but what about all of the other assistance you need? Just simple stuff like legal, getting documents and stuff in place. How important?
Do you mean from a security standpoint?
Not just security, but just in general, just in terms of starting up a business.
Yeah.
How important is that part of the world, that segment of our industrial society to your success?
Super important. So I had to learn the hard way what an accounting system was. Learned the hard way through multiple lawyers what a good startup lawyer is. So anybody wants to reach out to me later, I can give you some names of all the good ones. Super, super critical to have that set up. Also understanding that there are very few one-stop shops when it comes to those types of services. That's what, in my experience anyway. So, the one law firm isn't going to be able to do your IP and your corporate and your HR. You may need to go to different ones. That's something that was not obvious to me at all. So that's probably the big one. I have someone that works with us with regards to the finances and accounting and like the cap table and all of that stuff. So having that role in place as soon as you can is important as well, because it helps the organization. But of course, that's not a role that you can hire if you're bootstrapping. So then you do it yourself.
You got to do it. Yeah, exactly. David, I saw you nodding your head when Vicky was saying you turn to different firms for different skills. Can you just, why were you so enthusiastic there? Is it you have some experience on that front?
Sure. From a legal perspective,
Yeah.
one of a side hobby is that I've been a financial expert witness in a handful of legal cases. But I also see a lot of legal work and have had to do it for my own entities as well. And you really want somebody, especially in startup world, to have the experience in terms of what are standard venture terms, what are all the levers that get pulled from an investor perspective, what is the cap table going to look like, and they need to understand those things. And someone who is a litigation attorney shouldn't be doing that, and someone who's just a formation doc contract attorney probably shouldn't be doing that. And so you do want different skills and different applications for different things that you need. And then my comment in general from all those service providers is that that this is part of the ecosystem that is launching your company, and it takes a village. It takes an ecosystem to take a company from, to use the Peter Thiel term, from 0 to 1. And then it takes different people and different ecosystems to scale from 1 to infinity, hopefully. And so you will also have different people, different employees. I think there's a difference of 80% turnover from most companies from a series seed to a series A to a series A to a series B. And that is just part of realizing what you're doing here, is that it takes different people in a whole village.
Yeah.
Another fun fact for the startup folks out there: if you do, it's actually cheaper to get those legal services. The person who's really good at the HR contracts is going to be cheaper than the one-stop shop who says they can do it all. And then going to the different providers is actually a lot more cost. Yeah, it's actually way better. You'll get the big one-stop shops that'll tell you that they can do it all, but they will be more expensive in the long run, I promise.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. And I've seen some horror stories of this too, where
horror stories. I've lived one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you say that? That is it because the firms that specialize in this are just efficient at it? They're better. They know what they're looking for. They're just that much better at it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Doing it right the first time is also always far cheaper in construction and legal than to fix it down the road.
Yeah. And you get these law firms that they'll advertise at these accelerators and stuff that they can do it all, and they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Words of the wise. Question from Nanette on the Q&A. First, a two-part question, actually. Part one is what makes you excited about the current market and the innovation ecosystem out there, excluding CDL or beyond CDL, Patrick, as we already talked about that. What else is going on out there that really has you kind of excited? Vicky, are you exposed to anything that you would speak to?
I think this is more of a Chris and a Patrick and a David question, to be honest.
Okay. I'll send it off. Chris, are you exposed at all to exciting things going on in the ecosystem that really get you excited?
Well, I love the innovations that are coming out. The tougher the market is to operate in, the more innovative people get. And with the whole crash last year of commodity pricing, and with the ESG environment, for oil and gas companies, it's an extremely tough business to operate in here in Alberta, and it's getting tougher. And so it's what I'm excited about is some of the tools that are coming out. They make it, they lower the OPEX, they lower the cost, they make things safer, they make things more, less emissions and things like that, right? So as a buyer and a user of these things, it's, I'm like a kid in a candy shop sometimes. When there's a project, we go out there and there's plenty of these things that help us improve the business. So from that standpoint, that's how I'm excited.
Yeah.
At a macro level, I think it's important to realize that this industry, as an energy industry, not just oil and gas, is on the cusp of one of the biggest changes it's ever gone through. Energy transitions have only occurred in human history a handful of times, from the burning of biomass to the burning of coal to the burning of crude and natural gas, and now to some future energy source, okay? So energy transitions are rare in humanity. The other is that going through and applying digital tools and taking all of the things that we have learned in the last, call it 30, 40 years, is a digital transformation that's simultaneously occurring. And this is a very exciting time over the next, really probably 50 years. And then you look at, we've delivered as an industry excess energy to maybe 2 billion people, the world that we live in. We've delivered some energy to 2 billion people. It's usually inconsistent. And then we haven't delivered enough energy to roughly 3 billion people on the planet. And that's the population that's growing the most. So this is a humanitarian imperative to deliver those people clean, affordable energy. And I think that we are on the cusp of being able to do that through multiple sources and in a better way, cleaner, safer, more. And so I think if you're a human being, this is a very exciting time looking out over the next 20, 30 years in this industry, and possibly the most exciting time this industry's ever faced.
Yeah, I certainly tell young people, do not leave the industry when it's in change. This is precisely the time to get in. Fortunes are made. David, I really like your message about this is about humanity. It's not just about making money. It's about how do we help the world. It's really, really powerful message. One more question from the net on my screen here. So looking for any feedback or observations you might have about the recent federal budget and the money it's spending on digital transformation and the degree to which this will be enabling Canada to become a center of excellence around digital and innovation and the like. I personally am not across this topic. Has anyone touched on this one? Any exposure to it?
I'll say this from an outsider. I think Canada is a wonderful environment for grants and startup funding and government support far more than most other countries. So I think that there's a lot going on up there from a startup perspective, although Vicky says that there's not as much there going on from a customer perspective. So it's kind of a good situation where companies get started and it's easier to start a company up in Canada in general and then have customer base down in the US. So I think it's a great environment.
Great environment, yeah, exactly. Anybody else? Any other perspectives on the federal budget?
I can add a contrarian perspective. So yeah, I think the big caution for startups is you can spend your time with customers or you can spend your time hunting grants, and you only have so much time in a day. And where do you want to spend your time? Spending time with customers is much better for you in the long run. You know, if you can also get grants at the same time, fantastic. That's great. That was not our position as a company. We chose to spend time with customers, and I think that was the right choice.
Yeah, there's I've heard of an individual in Calgary called the Grant Sherpa, and she's built a business to help startups find their way through the labyrinth of grant programs and programming available in Canada. So there's a plug for the Grant Sherpa out there. I don't know what your name is, but I thought the brand was great. I see the panelists all smiling when they heard the name. Is yep, that sounds about right. Someone to help you find your way through the grant thicket. We're in the final.
I'll make a quick comment there to Vicky's point. Yeah, I've seen a lot of companies chase grant funding, and it can be very distracting and costly. And at the end of the day, if you've got a good business idea, you should be able to raise capital around it. It's great to get that non-dilutive funding. It's very powerful, and we can understand that. But a lot of times, government money is not free. It always comes with some strings attached to it. So you just have to be aware of that, chasing that false idol in some ways.
Yeah.
And the structure of it is quite limiting as a software startup. I think it's much more enabling for a hardware startup, but as a software startup, you're supposed to have a customer and you're supposed to have a plan with milestones. But if you're working with an early customer and you're iterating and you're actually using lean startup methodology, it's not possible for you to fulfill the reporting requirements for that grant because things are changing too quickly, and then therefore you're failing.
We are now in the final seconds of our panel discussion, and the queue for Q&A is bereft. And so I'm just going to wrap us all up now with just asking each of the panelists if they could provide some concluding thoughts based on the conversation today. You know, if you had to highlight what you'd call your key takeaways. And Chris, I'll start with you. What would you take away or key messages for the audience from the panel today?
Well, I guess my message would probably be to those in the audience who work for oil and gas companies, that we need to provide environments that nurture innovators here in Alberta, and we need to give them a chance. We need to be open to pilots and trials and proof of concepts and so on and so forth. In my own experience, the companies that I've worked with have done that, and they've done very well. And the technology has certainly paid dividends. Adopting new technology and going through the digital transformation has paid many dividends. I think that's the wave of the future for oil and gas companies. We have to digitize, we have to get better, we have to utilize all the data that we have, as opposed to just a small margin that we currently do. And these are the people that will help us with it.
Right on. David, over to you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'd just say it simply that momentum in the digital transformation across the energy industry is building, and that drastic change is on the horizon. So I think it's a great time to be participating in this space.
Fantastic. Vicky, over to you. Final thoughts, concluding thoughts for the panel.
Yeah, no, I think let's definitely, in Alberta, like, I'm a super proud Canadian, and I'm really stubborn, obviously, because I'm still here, still trying. So I echo Chris's words, give us all a chance. You might be pleasantly surprised by us here in Alberta, and Alberta grown technologies might be super useful.
Yep, take over the world. And Patrick, final words to you.
I would just have to say that I believe that the energy transition that presents a great opportunity for Alberta and for Canada. And many of us are in the paradigm of the energy system that we've come to know and enjoy for a long time. But there's a whole new industry that's about to open up in many different facets, and it already has been opening up. And we should always be mindful that we can take advantage of that and participate in that.
Right on. Thank you very much. Let me ask everyone out there to give a warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you to all the panelists. Thanks for giving all your valuable time and your wisdom. Much appreciated from Energy Now. Also wanted to mention that Jeffrey and Energy Now are forming a partnership to move forward with a new network or channel called Energy Now Tomorrow. And over the summer, we're going to be doing several interviews of different people on innovation, technology, digitization, and most likely these panelists will be invited back to do a one-on-one interview, and then we're going to be producing and then broadcasting it through Energy Now, through our YouTube channel, through different partners and things like that. So we're really excited to do that. It's going to be under our banner Energy Now Media, and then we'll be building that and growing it. So we're really dedicated to promoting innovation, and we're going to work forward in developing more of these types of sessions, be able to showcase people's innovation, build a great network of connections, and also maybe on the investment side as well, trying to find the right people, the right venture, the right opportunities there. So learned a lot from all the panelists today.